Welcome to the Supply Chain Pioneers podcast, where we highlight industry leaders on the forefront of innovation and technology in planning, procurement, and logistics. Hosted by your supply chain pro to know, Ulf Venne.
Welcome to Supply Chain Pioneers, episode 1. And what better way to start a podcast than with my good friend Koray Köse. He recently joined Everstream and directly went back to his roots at the Gartner conference in Barcelona. It was a very good time to meet him and discuss with him. And we did so on a rooftop at the Hilton Hotel. You will see the imagery is beautiful, and if you have the opportunity, watch a video. His experience is just great. He knows a lot about supply chain risk management. He helped a lot of companies mature their approach. In addition, his operational experience from VW and Bose really helps him move the needle day by day. We will talk about all of that, but also about his intercultural background. And overall, I feel it's a very insightful discussion at the right point in time where he really changes a job and has new perspectives and new experiences. Have a lot of fun and enjoy the episode.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Supply Chain Pioneers podcast. Today, I'm with Koray Köse from Everstream.
Thank you for having me, Ulf.
Of course, it's a pleasure. So as you can see, we're live together and we're at Gartner conference in Barcelona. Beautiful weather and beautiful background. And before we jump into Koray's journey in supply chain management and supply chain risk management, we actually want to talk a little bit about the Gartner conference. So what are your key takeaways?
I can say it was a solid conference. The themes of the last years continued, and there was one specific observation I had, and I'm not sure if you would agree, Ulf, but I felt technology is ahead of the process, because in the technology topics, we could already see the artificial intelligence disruption, I would almost say. And in the process, it was vertically going deeper. Mm-hmm. But while going deeper, I didn't feel there was a lot of leftover inspiration. It was, understood, makes sense. We are not there yet. We need to implement it. Whereas in AI, I felt like there was still a gap of knowledge, what it could do. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of prejudice still on the floor on the expo when we had this many discussions. What about our data security, who gets access? How do we use it? Where do we use it? Where is it maintained? And is it really as powerful and accurate as you may think about it? But so it was a lot of inspirational conversations where after the first 10 minutes, a lot of people stayed around another 20 minutes and they walked away and saying, wow, that was really a great conversation. Like, I have so many ideas right now when I go back home. I really check and follow up on that.
Yeah.
What was your take?
So for me, first of all, I think it's really a continuation. I felt a lot of the topics, risk and resilience being still very prevalent, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Also, workforce shortages and workforce constraints and pressure was a big topic. I really like that because I feel a lot of the people in supply chain did suffer a lot in COVID, and it's good that this is addressed. I do also feel that right now technology can do a lot, and we will have to adapt it more from a process perspective and find ways to do proper change management. I personally feel that the center of excellences that everybody's building are still a lot underused, because you find a lot of these solution providers providing great technology that needs to be adopted not only by a small amount of people, but needs to be really integrated into the processes. And the vehicle for change should be somewhere in a global function that could be a center of excellence. So for me, that's one of the key takeaways, that is something that more and more people have to adopt.
Yeah.
And I think overall it was a very interesting, very interesting conversation.
Right. There was maybe one thing I would also say is there is a threat to this transformation movement that we were able to observe in the last couple of years, and that's, of course, the economic pressure and headwinds and recession angst almost. And talking to some of the CSCOs, CPOs out there, looking into their priorities, cost pressures and cost management is again back on the rise. And I think that is a little bit like back to the future. I hope we do not forget in this that the true transformation will also improve costs, yet the focus should be on transformation, not cost, and changing cost into investment. So investing into the right processes is important. Then following up with the right technology is important. And then do it time and again until you basically have your entire organization digitized, and do not fear digitization and data sharing and collaboration with your suppliers. So when you turn collaboration now back again in the way we had like these blurbs of costs coming back up, then it will be again, can you make it cheaper just a little bit? I mean, this old school negotiation tactics seem to have a little window of renaissance, and I find that in this context, how do I say it nicely? Unfortunate maybe is the right, or uninspirational. So if you're a leader out there, I would urge you to keep the learnings really from the last year top of mind, and making sure you continue on the journey of truly revolutionizing supply chain. And that was what I was saying, like where the process was less inspirational than what the technology environment was talking about.
Yeah, I feel, I agree, but also I kind of a little bit disagree maybe, and that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I would say in a climate that we have right now, frankly, sales managers also have to do a better job in elaborating what is the value of my product, how can I build value, and if I do that and can show that it's really powerful what I do and it's really impactful, then I think you will still find people investing and not bargain for every tits and tatter.
Yep.
But so for me, going from the other direction, or from the CPO direction, for me it's more the sales manager have to clean up their value stories, make sure that they're actionable, that they're having use cases with clear value stories, and then everything should be fine. Obviously, you have to be convincing it as well. So there's a lot you have to do as a sales manager.
Yeah.
But in the end, that's your job, right?
But quite honestly, when you hear out of 5 conversations, 3 talk about working capital management improvement, and not about how can I digitize and become faster, more adaptable. I want to throw in the word agile here. I know we talked a little bit about that. To create dynamic and structural resilience, and you only hear that twice out of 5 conversations as a priority, that shows the trend maybe becoming, morphing into something that we have already seen in the past. And I always like to say, you invest when the market is in fear, and the market still is in fear, so it's time to invest from my perspective, and not so much to squeeze into the supply chain pressures that come really from macroeconomic factors that are a little bit out of your control anyways. And you may actually create a chain reaction into your supply chain that creates more fragility, and CPOs and CSCOs need to look further than the next quarter, further than the next year, right? So that's a little bit the reprioritization challenge that they have, I guess.
Yeah. But I mean, that's where a crawl, walk, run approach, where in crawl you already can deliver a lot of value. With an IT solution can really help, right, in a situation like that. And I feel good solutions and good solution providers can do that. So I'm still hopeful for the future of digitalization personally. But let's see. I mean, I'm happy to be, I would be very unhappy to be wrong, because not digitalizing your supply chain is not a good idea.
It's not an option.
Yeah, I'm more scared about the passion I saw on LinkedIn about this photo which went around where the guy held up a sign and said, "Don't manage your supply chain in Excel." And you saw so many people commenting on it and so many people liking it. And I was a little bit more afraid about that because I saw, are we still using Excel in supply chain? That shouldn't be the case, right?
Right.
How will you make data and analytics work if you have an Excel supply chain?
But I think there are a lot of companies still having very important data in Excel. So I would not shame them. I think Excel is a great tool. It creates a lot of agility for quick analysis. The depth of it, and then of course how long that data becomes manageable and maintainable is the question out there. And there are solutions that are nimble. There were a lot of vendors in the expo. Me just being a week in changing the seats, sort of, still had the mindset to walk around, learn, talk to other companies, and I could see, especially when it comes to AI, that there are a few companies that have really immersed into that, and they're really moving forward with that. And this is just the beginning. I mean, ChatGPT isn't even 6 months old for many users in that sense. So really exciting, I think, to just continue on that path.
Perfect. Okay, so now we talked, I think, enough about Gartner. Let's talk a little bit about you.
Okay,
so
because there's never enough about Gartner. Gartner is an endless topic we can talk.
I think we will come back to Gartner in a little
bit. Okay, let's do that. Yeah.
But I think it's supply chain pioneers, right? So it's all about why supply chain, why you, and your journey. So maybe let's start a little bit with, how did you start in supply chain management?
So it's old school a little bit, so don't expect a lot of inspiration from that. All right, it was literally just starting to get interesting when at my university there was a collaboration with Volkswagen, and they basically looked at some of the profiles and said, "Would you not like to join us?"
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, that sounds like a great company. I mean, if you grow up in Germany, Volkswagen is definitely the top brand you can think about. And in the concatenation with Scania and Volkswagen, that was actually a great experience. Started really in, first was supporting the Bentley integration, and it was just eye-opening how like a huge machine can work, how the processes are, how you engage with recommended vendors, or at the same point in time, how you engage with new vendors that are potential competitors to give you a better portfolio, right? So early on, really getting into the nitty-gritty negotiations, and that one led to the other. So then there was an opportunity to look into international operations. So spent some time in Mexico, and then it just continued that way and never really left supply chain too much. Went for a postgrad in the US and into a consultancy that was ERP, also operations. A lot of that. So every time you go 2 steps outside of like the core sourcing and supply chain environment, the gravity pulls you back in, because I highly believe in supply chain being an orchestration of value. And if you can be the director of that orchestration, I think you can really influence a lot of the success. But you also, of course, are blamed for a lot of the failure, even if you weren't really responsible for that. But I rather take that than just being an observer rather than a participant.
Would you also describe that's part of your nature in general, that you're one who really likes to take action and tries to be in the middle of things?
I think supply chain people have to be in that way, right? Because a lot of the times you don't even have the budget that you're deciding about necessarily. So if you don't go out and align, interests and make sure it's the best for the company, it's the best for the innovation, and if you're like just sitting there and crunching numbers, not talking to anyone and waiting for orders, then you're not really in supply chain, in my opinion.
So you feel that in supply chain management, in addition to a lot of operational knowledge, you also have to have a high amount of social skills. Is that what you're saying?
Social, yes. Not overly social, you know, you don't want to get into too many details with suppliers about your private life. But I think political is maybe the correct word.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but you should be social, of course.
Yeah.
But I think you always need to get your priorities set, and that framework is really important for your operations excellence too. You can see that in an environment of startups, entrepreneurs growing a business, right? First, you don't have a lot of the framework set. A lot of this is social, right? And once you grow, it becomes more political, and the political is complemented by a framework and rules and policies that should actually not hold you back, but enable you. And unfortunately, you know, policies, framework that is holding you back can actually make or break your company, or actually in that case would break your company.
Yeah, no, I agree. But it comes down to social intelligence at one point. Still, right? Because it's politics. Politics is still has to do with your social and politics.
I mean, if you look at the numbers in supply chain, there are really no rocket science, right?
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, but it's I think the complexity is still quite high, right? So I personally feel you have to have a very broad, overarching view of a bigger picture.
Yeah.
Even if you look at the nitty-gritty part of the process, you still need to understand how it feeds into everything else that happens before and after in your process flow.
You have to love complexity.
Yeah.
And you want to create something I coined in my research, sophisticated simplicity.
Oh, that's a good terminology. I love that.
Because simplification, taking out complexity, is not a good move in the mid and long run, because it becomes a commodity then. And the commodity becomes a Me Too product. And then you're basically just fighting on cost, not innovation. If you keep complexity in concatenation with value, I think then the complexity is good. If complexity means total inefficiencies, yes, get rid of it. Because I wouldn't call it sophisticated simplicity, then I would just call it burden, waste, right? So you should absolutely reduce burden and waste.
Good. So now we talked a little bit about your research as already.
I had to snuck it in.
Yeah, you had to. Yeah.
So let's directly
jump into it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Let's go into Gartner.
It's still out there, though.
Yeah, no, it's there. It's true. We can talk about this a little bit more. So let's start with Gartner.
Yeah.
You joined Gartner. How did that happen?
It was a coincidence, because about almost 10 years before I joined Gartner, I met a very nice recruiter, and his name was Tom. And whoever knows me knows Tom. And we were looking at some opportunities back then, just thinking out loud, and it didn't really work out. But we left a good impression on each other.
Yeah.
And then years passed, right? And he's UK based, and at some point I was at the Federal Reserve, and I was very content. Okay, I was excited when I started in the Federal Reserve, because it was really transforming a process that was I don't want to be like negative. It was not what I would have expected from the digitization standpoint and the efficiency standpoint. And when we went through the transformation there and the implementation of digital tools, and at the end actually also like an SAP Ariba selection, going through all of that and really kind of revamping the entire environment, I was content. But I was not necessarily super excited. So not that I was looking, but at one point I got an email like, you were referred to Gartner by Tom. And I thought it's spam, because I haven't heard from Tom for years. And then an email came like, yeah, you weren't selected. I'm like, okay, I never applied, never selected, it's fine. And then a third email came like, you were referred again by Tom. And then I thought maybe Tom's email got hacked. So I reached out to Tom and said, hey, Tom, good to hear from you, but I believe your email got hacked. And he was like, what do you mean? I said, I got this thing from Gartner saying like I was referred. I mean, what is this? He's like, no, I actually did. There's this open position, supply chain sourcing procurement, looking to risk and technology. And I remembered you, and I think you're the perfect fit. And I was like, okay, what do I have to do? Nothing. They'll reach out to you if you're okay with that. I'm like, yeah. And then this rigorous, and it's out there as knowledge, right? The recruitment process at Gartner is long, tough, time consuming. I doubted at points why I'm even doing that. I'm like, I'm content. Why should I create now a note for what, right? And it was like, multiple rounds of interviews. Once that was okay, they said, can you write about this topic? Pick one out of the three, and risk was the topic I selected. So I wrote a note over that paper, and then they said, oh yeah, we like the paper, can you put it into a presentation? I'm like, okay, yeah, put it in the presentation. Yeah, can you come for a panel interview? Fine, panel interview. So you go there, it's a couple hours, and then they let you know if you're actually going to get an offer or not. And they gave me an offer, and as a good supply chain sourcing procurement, you reject the first offer, right? That's what you have to do always. So you negotiate a little bit, and then I just started, and then in the onboarding they said, you won't understand your job at least 18 months, what you're supposed to do. But what was exciting is like they all said, look, this is probably one of the few jobs in the world that pays you to develop yourself, to learn and get immersed and basically at some point create a significant impact. And so that journey started.
Great. And your motivation was to go through that journey was what? Why did you want to be a Gartner analyst?
So I didn't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I have this thing, like when I start something, I usually I have to finish it. It's kind of, maybe it's a supply chain requirement. Like if you start something, you don't leave something half baked, or you don't go through an RFP and like you walk away like, I just did that. I just thought, it's not worth it. No, we usually bring it to the end somehow. And the more you got ingrained in that, the more conversations I had with them, the more I got like this understanding what it could be. And since I went through transformation projects my entire supply chain life, maybe at Bose, where it's basically changed the manufacturing company into a design and intellectual property company, and really building a manufacturing supply chain outside, right? Maybe at Kearney, where we went to companies that really needed help in order to revamp their processes. It was always kind of like that change excitement, I would call it, right? So, and in the risk, they said, like, really want you to build out that space. We want, to make sure that we have this covered. And it was really the prelude of the global trade wars, right? And if you remember 2018, 2019.
I do remember, yes.
Yeah, and then that was something that I was interested about, intrinsically, of course. And that gave me the platform to do so.
Great. So that's why you chose supply chain risk management, was the trade wars and your interest in the political tension?
The digitization, the disruption. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. The geopolitical shifts that were already starting in that time. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Interesting. So you have advised many clients over the years on what they should do, how they should do it, how they organize themselves.
Yeah.
But also you have given tips on solution providers. And now you have changed the field to Everstream Analytics, right? So
you know what they said at the conference? Now you're at the dark side. I said it's actually lighter than you may think. There's more light on this side than you may actually assume. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I would not call it the dark side.
So how does it feel now working for solution providers? You're in like 4 or 5 days. I mean, you can't talk so much about the product, I guess, but what's your feeling being with the team?
First of all, I feel very welcome. Okay. I cannot say it's not intense. It is intense. It's high pace.
Yeah.
It's it requires your ability to pivot on the spot. And you need to have a high degree of comprehension of the matter in order to make actually a very meaningful conversation, because people really want to have meaningful conversation. They don't want to get your marketing spiel, right? And I would say I wrote about the supply chain risk management technology market for a little bit over 4 years. So I saw the changes, the good and the bad changes, right? Companies come and go. And I actually would say, and I wouldn't disagree with you, but I would say I knew the product pretty well because it was a big part of the decision. Was a big part of the decision. Because when you're looking at the market and you're looking at very, very motivated founders, a lot of capital influx, but you don't need to, you must not forget that the capital that comes in wants to multiply and then leave. It's not like, here you go, play around, waste the money. Quite the opposite, right? So if you create that dynamic, there's also this pressure to overclaim and oversell. And that was something you had to basically digest and make sure that in the evaluations and in the understanding that we built up for the Gartner clients, we had to be as unbiased and true to the fact as possible. And give them even a reprioritization feedback when they already chose a vendor, and say like, look, what we have seen, they can do it, so you shouldn't change them. Go back and have that conversation, maybe restructure your implementation. And when we were convinced that a solution does not provide that kind of capability, we actually said your expectations are not accurately communicated to the technology, because at some point the technology vendor will also say, we can't do this. I mean, why we have this conversation and pain continuously, at some point you will say, we can't do this. Right?
Okay, interesting. So let's get a little bit to another more meta stage, I would call it. In supply chain
meta stage. We're going to the metaverse.
We're going to the we're not going to the metaverse, but we're going into intracultural relationships. So you are a German Turkish living in America with a wife from Mexico and an American child. How did your experience with multiple languages?
Well, she has multiple passports. But unfortunately, she started to sometimes have a Bostonian accent.
Okay. So you have a lot of different ties in culture, and you speak a lot of different languages. How did that help you in your overall supply chain journey and your way of thinking?
I think it made me less. It creates a more fearless character, because you're always involved into something that is different. And I think that is how supply chain works. You have to innovate, re-innovate, and continuously improve and continuously improve. And if the moment you stop, you become a nowist, and then you're near death and you're out of the market. Right? So I think that certainly. And the other thing is, supply chain is very much, despite of us saying like digital technology, it's still a people business. So if you're not able to create relationships, and you're missing out on the creative factor. And the creative factor is always the one that is the end. Creativity is the engine of innovation. Right? And creativity in generative AI is not yet a thing in that way. Why? And others may disagree, but I don't think that creativity requires a certain foundation to come out, right? But in Gen AI, it always requires the data to concatenate to create something new. And human ingenuity is not always created by data that would, in concatenation, create something new. Sometimes it's a totally unrelated experience, right? That you say, I want to do it this way, or I want to go that way. And it can be also very irrational. So, and irrationality can become also source and catalyst of innovation, because in the moment it's irrational, like holding a device and looking at it and being in your handheld device, 20 years ago was very irrational. They would say like, what the heck, I want to read the newspaper, I want to have this newspaper right now here, maybe flying in the wind and in your face, instead of like having this handheld device and scroll like this, right? Very irrational maybe for the people at that point in time. So I think when you are a person of multicultural exposure, and I know you were, you speak Chinese, right? So there are a lot of people speaking Chinese.
There are a lot of people.
Yes, but there are very few people. Maybe they are German that speak Chinese. And now I'm in a company where the two people I met almost first, they are, I spent 3 years in China. I speak Chinese. Wow, right? Yeah. So that is something that like-minded people find like-minded people without looking for them.
I think so.
They just bump into each other because they like to go to the same places, they have similar interests and so on. So I think that is how that really helps, right?
Yeah. No, I would totally agree. I did have one final question for you that came while you were talking about innovation and how it's driven.
Yeah.
So I remember. Sorry, guys. So based on what you described, you don't think we're going to be replaced by AI soon?
No, I don't. It's like, hey, when I take a picture, does it take my soul kind of question, right?
Of course, I think so, yeah.
Is it me talking through the phone line, or what is this magic in there? Like, I don't want to give my voice away. Like, maybe someone in the caveman state said, we don't want to have a wheel. We would like to continue to carry stuff. What's wrong with this person? Like pushing a cart around, right? This is not good. I don't know. I feel like it's always this repetition of innovation fear that becomes normalized, and you generally see a specific generation creating that fear. And I don't want to be like age shaming here, but generally I would say generations that have been longer around on the planet are more fearful of innovation that may be technologically disruptive. And maybe that's just a prejudice I have. But if you look around and say, hey, who is actually pushing AI? Who is using AI first? Who is implementing use cases the first? You usually look at people who are fearless. And that is
curious.
Yeah, so there is Rick Vera, a good friend of mine, who wrote, about curiosity, and he calls it, if your company's net curiosity score is dropping, you have a true and fundamental issue. So you need to always keep your net curiosity score up, and curiosity doesn't mean reckless innovation, it means fearless innovation. Because innovation shouldn't be instinct driven, it should be interest driven. There's a very distinguished, maybe marginal difference between instinct and interest.
Okay. Yeah, I'm personally not so sure about the age. I feel that's more a character thing personally.
That is true. That is true.
But yeah, no, it's great.
Maybe I'm just getting old and I'm saying like those things like
maybe that's it. I think so, actually.
Like in 5 years from now, the next big thing,
I'll be like,
I'll be on the pioneers and say like, careful, don't do this, don't touch this, this is no good.
Yes. But for now, you're still a pioneer for sure.
Okay.
So
maybe I am. Maybe
I would say let's call it a day. That was great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for watching.
Yes.
Koray, any final words, my friend?
I recommend everyone to come down to Barcelona at some point in their life. It's my first time, and it's an amazing city.
Yeah.
And if you come with people you can tolerate, you should definitely do that.
And when you're in Barcelona, I recommend the hop on, hop off bus tour, because you can do a lot within 2 days in Barcelona and get a lot of good sightseeing. And with that,
great food.
And great food, yeah.
Yes.
And with that, I say, have a nice day, everyone. Bye-bye.
So long, everyone.
This was Supply Chain Pioneers. Thanks for watching, listening, or however you are enjoying this podcast. You can find Supply Chain Pioneers on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all other major podcast players, as well as on YouTube at Ulf Talk Supply Chain. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. See you next time.